Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, and in this video I would like to again generalize an integral. So let's get started. So the integral that I'm attempting to generalize, let's call that I, is defined as the integral from 0 to infinity of sine of x to the n divided by x to the n dx. So now, since both the denominator and the argument of the sine have x raised to the same power, it's a wise choice to perform a substitution. Let u equal x to the n. So du is nothing but, I have to use the power rule, so n times x to the n minus 1 times dx, but let's isolate dx now. So dx is nothing but du over n times x to the n times x to the negative 1. I'm just breaking them down using properties of exponents. So now notice that x is nothing but u to the 1 over n. So x to the negative power is negative u to the negative 1 over n basically. So this means that dx is nothing but du over n times x to the n is u times x to the negative 1 is u to the negative 1 over n. So this becomes du over n times properties of exponents again, u to the 1 minus 1 over n power. So it's time to plug all of this into our I, and notice that the upper and lower bounds remain the same, because if you plug in 0 in place of x, x to the n is going to be 0, and same thing for infinity. So we have sine of u divided by u, and dx is just du over n times u to the 1 minus 1 over n. So now 1 over n is a constant, and we have integral from 0 to infinity. Let's bring these powers up and basically multiply by a negative in each of their powers respectively. So a singleton u in the denominator becomes u to the negative 1. Same thing over here, we just have to multiply by a negative 1 when we bring this term on the top. So we have u to the now 1 over n minus 1, and we still have this sine of u du over here. Now again, using properties of exponents, this becomes 1 over n times integral from 0 to infinity of u to the 1 over n minus 2 times the sine of u du. So although we have compactified it in this form, I would still like to express I as 1 over n times the integral from 0 to infinity of u to the 1 over n minus 1 times the sine of u du. Now I want to generalize this this integral further, because this is really interesting. So instead of 1 over n minus 1, basically the bracketed power, let's define p and call the generalized version of this j naught. So we have j naught defined as, forget the 1 over n for now, integral from 0 to infinity of, well, we can change our variable of integration, right? As long as it's a definite integral, it doesn't matter what variable you have. So let's have x. Instead of 1 over n minus 1, I said let's have p. So p minus 1 times the sine of x dx. So let's attempt to calculate this on a fresh page. See you there. So we generalized our problem to j naught, which is defined as integral from 0 to infinity of x to the p minus 1 power times sine of x dx, and this is, can be expressed as a Mellin transform. So curly m, this is the Mellin transform of sine of x basically. And let me write down what a Mellin transform is defined to be. So a Mellin transform of, say, a function is defined as integral from 0 to infinity of x to some parameter. Here it was p, let's have t now, t minus 1 times that function f of x dx. And one interesting thing is, notice that when this is a special case now, when f of x is nothing but e raised to negative x, such that you have the Mellin transform of e raised to negative x, that is going to be integral from 0 to infinity of x to the t minus 1 times e raised to x dx. And what is this? That's just the gamma of t, right? So this is the Mellin transform is sort of a generalization of the gamma function. So this is one way of generalizing the gamma function. So I think that's all you need to know in this video about the Mellin transform. Now after this turned out to be the Mellin transform of sine of x, you could just refer to a Mellin transform table and just plug in the values. But I say let's go ahead and calculate what this thing exactly is manually. So in order to find j naught, we have to make another generalization now. So let's say j is our generalization of j naught, is defined as the integral from 0 to infinity of x to the p minus 1 times e raised to negative ix dx. And you may ask me, why e raised to negative ix exactly? So two reasons. So reason one is, notice that e raised to ix is equal to cosine of x plus I times sine of x. So we will obtain the sine of x if we only consider the imaginary part later on. And if you put a negative here, this positive in between will change to a negative. So basically j naught is nothing but negative of the imaginary part of integral j. So that's how we can come to j naught after we calculate j. Reason number two is, exponentials are easier to work with naturally, because we are doing calculus. Exponentials are a real boon to work with. And also you might ask me, why a negative then specifically, why not a positive? That's because of convergence issues, to tackle convergence issues, because from the interval from 0 to infinity, if we have e raised to a positive power, this will blow up to infinity, right? But instead, if we have a negative power, that is going to be a decaying function. So that is going to converge 100%. So that's why we know this will we know a negative power on e is going to converge on this interval from 0 to infinity. That's why we chose a negative. So I hope I'm making myself clear as to why I chose e raised to negative ix. Now let's go forward with the substitution. Let's make the substitution. Let u equals ix, because then we'll have e raised to negative u, right? So we will come close to having a gamma function, and gammas are really nice. Fine, so du is naturally I times dx. So we have the integral. I'll calculate the upper and lower bounds later. Instead of x, we have u over I to the p minus 1 power collectively times e raised to negative u now, and dx is just du over I. And now the upper and lower bounds. So notice when x is 0, u is also 0, right? I times 0 is 0. But now notice that when x tends to infinity, u becomes I times infinity. So I times infinity. Now you may ask me why I wrote I times infinity and not just infinity, because I is just a small finite number and infinity is really large. So they're blowing up. The product is blowing up to infinity, right? Again. So why didn't I just write infinity, and why did I write I times infinity? That's because there is a difference when you write I times infinity and an infinity. So this integral from 0 to I times infinity is purely imaginary. So say this is your complex plane. This is the imaginary axis, this is the real axis. You have 0 here, and eventually you go to infinity here, and we have I terms here, right? I, then 2i, then 3i, and eventually I times infinity. So when I say integral from 0 to I times infinity, it's integral over this axis, basically imaginary axis. It's an imaginary integral. Versus if I just say integral from 0 to infinity, then it's by definition going to be integral over this. So that's where we have a distinction. And integral from 0 to I times infinity is not necessarily equal to integral from 0 to infinity. It again depends on what function you are integrating. So we'll have to actually prove that integral from 0 to I times infinity is actually equal to integral from 0 to infinity in our case, in our choice of integrands. So I hope you understand why the difference between I times infinity and just 0 to infinity. So now this becomes integral from 0 to I times infinity times u to the p minus 1 divided by I to the p minus 1 times I, and we have a e raised to negative u du. Now this simplifies. This negative 1 and this I will just cancel out. So we have 1 over I, but everything to the pth power, times integral from 0 to I times infinity of u to the p minus 1 times e raised to negative u du. Now as I said, this is the integral on the imaginary axis. So we need to show that integral over the imaginary axis is equal to integral over the real axis, because when we are on the real axis, that's when we can conclude this as a gamma function. Gamma function was defined from 0 to infinity, not from 0 to I times infinity. So making that distinction, we need to first check whether this is equal to its real counterpart or not, or if there is any constant that's being multiplied or something. So let's go ahead and do an elaborate complex analysis using a contour map. So see you on the next page. So this is exactly what our generalization of J0, in other words J, turned out to be. Fair enough. So let's say f of z is equal to just this integrand, but with complex variables instead of u's, which are in this case real. So we have e raised to negative z times z to the p minus 1. That's basically your integrand, and we call that f of z. Okay, so to map a contour, basically the path that we are integrating on. So let me first draw the contour. So we have 0 here. So we are going to go from 0 to r, and then we are going to curve around like this in a quarter circle. Forgive my bad drawing again. And again, since the radius is constant for even a quarter circle, we have end up at r, and then from r we go back to 0. So we go from 0 to r, then on this quarter circle, and then from r to 0. So this is your real axis and this is your imaginary axis. So notice that previously our integral was going from 0 to I times infinity. So it was going along this imaginary axis. So in this contour we've covered that imaginary axis, and since we want to show that it is equal to the integral over the real axis, basically integral from 0 to infinity, we've also shown the real axis. So whatever path we take, this quarter circular path that we've taken, we naturally cover the real axis that we want to actually convert our imaginary integral to, and also the imaginary axis. That's where our original integral is. So now let me write the contour equation for this. We have the contour integral of f of z with respect to z, and that's going to be, let's call this path 1, let's call this path gamma, and let's call this path 2. It's going to be integral over path 1 of f of z dz plus integral over gamma of f of z dz plus integral over path 2 of f of z dz. So the contour integral is going to be, well, path 1 is going from 0 to r, right? So 0 to r of f of z we know is e raised to negative z times z to the p minus 1 dz plus integral over gamma of e raised to negative z to the p minus 1 dz and integral over path 2 of e raised to negative z times z to the p minus 1 dz. So now notice that integral over path 1 basically from 0 to r is completely along the real axis. So our complex variable z, which was equal to x plus iy, has no imaginary component, so this y is 0. So z is equal to x only on path 1, which is this. So instead of z we can write x is integral from 0 to r of e raised to negative x times x to the p minus 1 dx. And it looks like we are going to have to parameterize path 2 because it's along this. So notice that if you want to describe any point on path 2, we would have to use the parameterization. Let z equals ix, because multiplying by I will rotate any number which is on the real axis. So basically a variable x or a number that is generalized with x will rotate. I will rotate that by 90 degrees, and we have an exact angle of 90 degrees between the imaginary axis and the real axis. So this will basically convert, say, this point, calling this x naught. It will just rotate this onto this, which you can say z naught for now. So that is basically, that will convert, it will map every point on this real axis on the imaginary axis. Multiplying by I will rotate this point by 90 degrees. So that's why this is a nice parameterization for path number 2. Let's now plug that into our path number 2 integral. So instead of z we have ix, and again the path is going from r to 0, right? So upper and lower bounds are r and 0 even after parameterization. So from r to 0, instead of z we have e raised to negative ix, and ix to the p minus 1, and notice that dz is I times dx. So we have a single I times dx plus integral over gamma of e raised to negative z times z to the p minus 1 dz. Okay, so now the only troubling part is this integral over path gamma. So let's try to calculate that or find the value of that on a fresh page. So now notice that gamma was this quarter circle path, right? So I'm going to parameterize it as radius, which is r naturally because radius is a constant. So z equals r times e to the it, where t ranges from 0 to pi over 2, because when t becomes pi over 2, that's when we end up over here. So integral now from 0 to pi over 2 of e raised to negative r times e raised to it, because instead of z we have to plug that in, and z to the p minus 1, so this thing to the p minus 1, so r to the p minus 1 times e raised to it to the p minus 1, and what's dz? Dz is ri times e raised to it dt. So if ri e raised to it dt. So notice that one of the negative powers cancel out with this r. Same thing over here. So now we just have I times integral from 0 to pi over 2 of e raised to negative r times e to the it times r to the p times e to the itp dt. So this can be written as I times integral from 0 to pi over 2 of r to the p times e to the itp divided by e to the r times e to the it dt. And now we have to take the limit as r tends to infinity. So when r tends to infinity, both the numerator and denominator will tend to infinity, but since an exponential term grows way faster and reaches infinity way quicker than a regular polynomial term, the denominator goes to infinity first. So we have a really large denominator really quickly. That means this thing just decays to 0. And in case you're wondering why we just out of the blue took the limit as r tends to infinity over here, don't worry, we are going to take this limit as r tends to infinity on both path 1, integral over path 1 and integral over path 2 too. So don't worry about that. I just had to show that integral over gamma goes to 0 so that we have one less integral to worry about. So we just showed that this thing goes to 0. Now what is this contour integral equal to actually? If you remember residue theorem, this contour integral was just equal to 2 pi I times the sum of residues. And residues were basically calculated from the pole values. So basically the values where the function blows up to infinity or just becomes undefined. But are there any poles over here? Are there any such values of z where the function becomes undefined? Well, no, right? Over this contour, no, right? Because we don't even have a denominator. Otherwise, we would just set the denominator equal to 0 and then find z accordingly. So there are no singularities, no poles, so no residues. So residues go to 0. So 2 pi I times 0 is 0. So this contour integral is just equal to 0. So entirely this contour integral is equal to 0. And we have integral from 0 to r of e raised to negative x times x to the p minus 1 dx. And notice that this I cancels out with this. So we just have I to the p and integral from, now we can flip the upper and lower bounds if we take a negative here by properties of definite integration. We have e raised to negative ix times x to the p minus 1 still dx. So now rearranging the negative on that side, we have I to the p times integral from 0 to r of e raised to negative ix times x to the p minus 1 dx is just equal to integral from 0 to r of e raised to negative x times x to the p minus 1 dx. And now I would like to take the limit as r goes to infinity. So you remember we took the limit for the gamma part. We're taking the limit now again. So I hope you're satisfied now. So now we just have integral from 0 to infinity now, because r tends to infinity, of e raised to negative ix times x to the p minus 1 dx is equal. I can take the I on that side, basically dividing both sides by I to the p. I have 1 over I, but the whole thing to the pth power, times integral from 0 to infinity of e raised to negative x times x to the p minus 1 dx. So now notice the interesting observation that this is nothing but j. You can check, we can go above and check if you want. So j was equal to this thing, and we have that over here. So but j was also equal to 1 over I to the p times this integral over the imaginary axis. So let's go plug that in place of j now below. So in place of j, I'm going to put 1 over I to the p times integral from 0 to I times infinity, basically integral over the imaginary axis of e to the negative, there was a u, we can just change variables because this is definite integration, e raised to negative x times x to the p minus 1 dx is just equal to this thing, 1 over I to the p times integral from 0 to infinity of e raised to negative x times x to the p minus 1 dx. And notice that these factors are cancelling out nicely. So what does this mean? So this means that integral over on the imaginary axis basically is equal to integral on the real axis. Just for this choice of f of z, basically just e raised to negative z times z to the p minus 1, just for this integrand. For other integrands you would have to show the equality again, or if they're not equal then you have to say that accordingly. So this was detailed complex analysis just to prove a single fact that integral from 0 to I times infinity, basically integral going this way, is equal to integral going this way. So both of them are equal, and that's really helpful because now we can just go back to this page and just instead of the integral from 0 to I times infinity, basically integral over the imaginary axis, we can write this as the integral over the real axis, because I just showed that to you using complex analysis and contour mapping. So j now just becomes 1 over I to the pth power, but now the integral from 0 to infinity of u to the p minus 1 times e raised to negative u du, and this is a real integral, this is not on the imaginary axis, this is on the real axis. Now we can write this as 1 over I but to the pth power times, well, this is just the gamma of p, right? Because now we have integral on the real axis, so we can just write this in terms of a gamma function. So this is gamma of p, and I can just write this as a negative power. So I have I to the negative p times gamma of p, and that's just our j. But now remember that I can be written as e to the I pi over 2 using Euler's formula, so we can plug that in. So now j becomes e to the negative I times pi over 2, but still multiplied with a p, times the gamma of p. So now you can basically write Euler's formula in terms of sines and cosines. We have cosine of pi over 2 p minus, because of the negative here, sine of I times negative I times sine of pi over 2 p, and all this is just multiplied with the gamma function. But what was j naught? J naught was just negative imaginary part of j. So the imaginary part of j is just this sine part, right? Forget the cosine part as the real part. So forget the I too. So we have negative sine of pi over 2 p times gamma of p. That's your j naught, and the I negatives cancel out. So j naught is just sine of pi over 2 p times gamma of p. And if you remember what was j naught, j naught was just the Mellin transform of sine of x. So the Mellin transform of sine of x, when you have a parameter p, because we had x to the p minus 1 if you remember, and this parameter can change again when you had a parameter p. So Mellin transform, you can say with respect to p, just for now, is equal to sine of pi over 2p times the gamma function of p. Fine, we have our j naught in place after calculating j. Now it's actually time to revert back to our original problem I. So this was basically our I naught, but our I was, sorry, this is our j naught. He's messed up with the alphabets. So our I now was, if you remember, 1 over n times integral from 0 to infinity of u to the 1 over n minus 1 minus 1 times sine of u du, right? And when we were generalizing, I said let p equals 1 over n minus 1, right? When we were generalizing. So now instead of p, we just plug that in. So we have 1 over n, that's an extra factor compared to j naught. And inside we just have a Mellin transform now of sine u, but with respect to the parameter 1 over n minus 1 instead of having p like we had in this case. So it's simple really. Instead of p, we just plug in 1 over n minus 1 now. So we have 1 over n times sine of pi over 2 times 1 over n minus 1 times gamma of, instead of p we have 1 over n minus 1. So just to clean this up a bit, we can write this as 1 over n times gamma of 1 over n minus 1 times the sine of pi over 2n times 1 over n in a bracket. That's basically what your problem I, our original problem I, is. So in conclusion, we had our original I defined as integral from 0 to infinity of sine of x to the n divided by x to the n dx, and we used the concepts of Mellin transforms and basically calculated the Mellin transform of sine of x with respect to whatever parameters we had, and we ended up with 1 over n times gamma of 1 over n minus 1 times sine of pi over 2n times 1 minus n. And now notice that if you let n equals 1, you'll have basically the Dirichlet integral. So I of 1, let's say, integral from 0 to infinity of sine of x over x dx, and we know this is just equal to pi over 2. But if you plug the same over here, you have gamma of 1 over 1 minus 1, gamma of 0 and sine of 0. So sine of 0 will go to 0, but the gamma of 0, basically the gamma of 0 is pretty undefined, because if you have integral from 0 to infinity of e raised to negative x divided by x now dx, that will be your gamma of 0, and we know that this thing basically is going to diverge eventually. So gamma of 0 basically does not exist. So we have a dead end when we put n equals 1, right? So basically it doesn't work for n equals 1. So this generalization is valid for n greater than 1. So, but still, if you want to include the case of n equals 1, then you can probably write this as some sort of piecewise generalized integral. So this integral is basically, so you can write this in a sort of piecewise function manner. So when n equals 1, you have pi over 2, but for when n is greater than 1, you have this 1 over n times gamma of 1 over n minus 1 times sine of pi over 2n times 1 minus n. So you can have this piecewise generalization if you want to include n equals 1 case. But for pretty much everything else, it's pretty much satisfied. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this generalization. So please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Recommend me to your friends, mathophiles, any people you think would be interested in this kind of nice math stuff. Follow me on Instagram. I have this username over here, gamma_digamma. I post math, art and stuff, and I'm going to build more on that in the future. And in the meantime, stay home, stay safe, have a great day, peace out.